What if the Black Death had wiped out 80% of humanity instead of just around 30%? Let's imagine Europe in the 14th century. Cities were already dying. Rats scurried through narrow, filthy streets carrying fleas that carried death. The real plague, the Black Death, killed somewhere between a third and half of Europe's people. It was a tragedy beyond imagination, but what if it had been even worse? What if 8 out of every 10 people had died? First, picture the silence. Entire villages would vanish. Farmland would turn to wild fields, churches, castles, and marketplaces would stand empty, echoing only with the wind. There would be no one left to bury the dead, no one to ring the church bells. In real history, after the plague, some people still survived to rebuild. But in this world, there would be almost no one left to even start over. The first thing that would collapse is society itself. Governments would fall apart because kings, nobles, priests, and soldiers would all be dead or scattered. Trade would stop, no ships sailing across the Mediterranean, no caravans on the Silk Road, no craftsmen making tools or clothes. The few survivors would live like ghosts among ruins, scavenging for food in abandoned towns. Ironically, the plague itself might eventually disappear. With so few humans alive, the disease would have nowhere to spread. The rats and fleas would die off too, leaving a quiet, almost empty world. But here's the twist: humanity might not stay gone forever. The survivors would adapt. With so few people, food and land would suddenly be plentiful. Forests would regrow, rivers would clear, and nature would reclaim the world. Wolves and bears would roam through city streets. It would look like the planet was healing. Because it would be. Over time, small human communities would begin to form again. Imagine tiny villages surrounded by forests, where people live simple lives, telling stories about a time when giant stone towers once reached the sky, not realizing they were talking about the old cathedrals of medieval Europe. Technology would collapse to something close to the Bronze Age. Metal tools would be rare treasures found among ruins. Science and knowledge would almost completely vanish. Books would rot, languages would fade, and even writing might disappear in some places. People would see the old world as something mystical, maybe even cursed. The ruins of ancient cities would become holy or haunted places no one dared to enter. And the religion of the survivors would change too. In real history, the Black Death made people question the Church, eventually leading to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. But in this alternate world, the opposite might happen. Faith would grow even stronger, or stranger. Maybe people would start worshipping death itself, believing it had spared them for a reason. The few who could heal or survive sickness would be seen as divine. By the 1500s, instead of discovering the New World or inventing printing presses, humanity would still be rebuilding basic farming tools. Civilization would restart from zero. It might take thousands of years before people reached the same level of technology we had in the Middle Ages, but what about the rest of the world? The plague hit Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa, but not everywhere equally. In this version of history, regions like sub-Saharan Africa or the Americas might survive better. They could become the centers of the new human world. Africa, untouched by the worst of the plague, could rise into a powerful civilization while Europe turns into a dark, abandoned continent covered in forests. And if that happened, history itself would flip. The Renaissance might begin in Africa or the Middle East instead of Italy. The future world might speak Swahili or Arabic instead of English or French. Explorers from Mali or Ethiopia might one day sail west and discover the overgrown ruins of Europe, wondering who built the stone skeletons buried under vines. Still, there's a strange upside. With 80% of humans gone, the Earth's climate might cool faster. Scientists think the real Black Death actually caused a mini ice age because so much farmland turned back into forests that it sucked carbon out of the atmosphere. If 80% of people vanished, the effect would be far stronger. The world could cool dramatically for centuries. Snowy winters, frozen rivers, colder summers, nature would win for a while. But eventually, humans would rise again. They always do. Maybe it would take 10,000 years, maybe more. But one day, someone would rediscover the old books, the old machines, and start asking questions again. What happened to the people before us? And maybe one of those curious survivors would dig up a skull, realize what disease had once swept the planet, and whisper the name in fear, the Black Death. If that plague had killed 80% of us, the world we know today, every city, every invention, every idea, might never have existed. But maybe, just maybe, the Earth itself would be better off, and the strangest part. Somewhere in a parallel universe, maybe that's exactly what happened.